Every day there are unexplained healings that some say are miraculous. Dr. Marc Siegel, NYU professor of medicine, joins me with his prescription for discovering miracles in your own life, especially when facing a crisis. All on this edition of Arroyo Grande. Come on. I'm Raymond Arroyo. Welcome to Arroyo Grande. Go subscribe to the show now and turn those notifications on so you know what's coming. And if you'd like to support the show, please visit RaymondArroyo.com. There's a donate bar there. We'd love your assistance. My guest tonight has spent his life trying to heal illnesses, and he's observed what others often miss, the miraculous. Dr. Marc Siegel is a Fox News senior medical analyst, clinical professor of medicine at NYU Langone Health, and he's captured his findings in a new book, the #1 New York Times bestseller, The Miracles Among Us, How God's Grace Plays a Role in Healing. Dr. Marc Siegel, welcome to Arroyo Grande. Now, look, you've been a physician for over 30 years at NYU Langone. In all that time, have you witnessed moments that simply can't be explained by science alone? Walk us through one of those moments, if you would.
The one that minted me, there's two events in my life that minted me. The first was when my oldest son was born, and this is a non-medical story. I was wandering the streets trying to figure out my role in life, as a lot of first-time fathers are, confused. And I ran into a guy that was sitting on a folding table with a prayer book, and he looked at me as I passed. He looked up, he gave me the prayer book, and he said, "Pray for the health of your newborn son." I said, "How do you know I have a newborn son?" And he smiled. And when I walked on, I looked back over my shoulder thinking, this guy must not really be there. He was there, and he smiled back. And after that, I became religious.
Really?
I decided to, well, and that plus the idea of family values didn't hurt. I'm bringing up a child. I wanted them to have a regularity, not just my anxiety, And the whole idea of God, of course, is that it gives you a calming feeling, knowing that you're in the presence of a greater truth, a greater reality. You fear God, not your fellow man. All of that comes to you the more that you pray.
Yeah.
The other event that was more the question you're asking me is that when I was an intern, I was working one rotation in the ICU. We worked between those four walls for 12-hour shifts, and we were minted to our resident crew. And their emotions were our emotions. Their snide jokes were our snide jokes. And there was one guy that was in there for 3 months, didn't move. He was in a locked-in state, in a vegetative state. The family was at his bedside, nonstop, day and night praying. And every now and then they would come out of the cubicle and say, "Look, his heart rate's up a little. Look, his blood pressure's going up. Look, did you see he twitched his eye? He's breathing a little faster." And every time we kind of looked sideways at each other and had kind of a, oh, here we go again. And I felt that that was going to be my future. A certain amount of sardonic response or jadedness or, even downright like not mocking people, but feeling like, here we go again.
Right.
But you know what? After 3 months, he woke up and walked out of the hospital and went back to work to the same restaurant he had worked in before. That ended up being my lesson. Not giving up, holding out hope. Prayers work. Don't dismiss a family. Don't dismiss a patient. That's why I wrote this book.
Is that the case where you said something else is happening here?
It wasn't that case, but it's very similar to that point, which is that you think one thing is happening and something else is happening. That's one of the main themes and motifs of the book. You think one thing is happening, something else is happening. You actually have to be open to that something else, and you have to learn from it to be a healer.
Yeah.
When we're early in our training, we want to be healers. We get jaded. We become scientists and applied scientists, like mechanics. But if you're open to the idea that just something different may be happening than you're expecting, and I think you may be thinking of the Brett Baer story, where the guy, where Brett Baer's son is born, and he's not thriving, and he's very pale, and he and Amy are very devout Catholics, and they're praying, and they're praying, and they're praying, and she's all about love for the newborn son, and Brett is all about organization and trying to figure things out, like you and I would be at Raymond, just trying to figure out what to do.
What's the next step?
What's the next step? Who's the next step? What doctor? What hospital? What procedure? And in the middle of all this, a doctor's passing the hospital, and he's not on duty. And he just says, maybe I should go in. Maybe I should go in. He stops his car. He doesn't know why. He goes in, and he gravitates toward that bedside, and he says, failure to thrive. He looks pale, and he's a cardiologist, happens to be a pediatric cardiologist. He says, I'm going to do an echocardiogram on this baby. He does it, and he finds a complex congenital abnormality that hadn't yet been found. It's that moment, well, maybe, and then later, flash forward 16 years, they're going to see a new internist with Paul.
Yeah.
And the internist is just for a cold, but the internist says, well, maybe, and this is your point, maybe I should check an x-ray. I don't know why. I would normally not check an x-ray.
X-ray his lungs.
Right. Normally not check an x-ray of his lungs. But somehow I think I should. I don't know why. I can't justify it. Does an x-ray and he sees that the heart shadow is a little enlarged. And he says, well, that must be from all the prior surgeries. Nothing to worry about. But you know what? Just as a precaution, my intuition says, show it to his cardiologist. The cardiologist sees it and says, well, this is normal. But maybe it's slightly bigger in one area than before. Maybe I'll do an echocardiogram. They find an aneurysm that was about to burst. Paul goes out and plays golf with Brett the night before the operation, beats Brett. That's the courage of this kid. And he survives and he does well. But that's that. All of that, by the way, stuff I call the miracle lane. You're in the miracle lane. And somebody said to me yesterday, how about the things that could have gone wrong? And that's the point. A miracle is an accumulation of things that barely go right.
Yeah. Marc, we live in an age where science and faith are often pitted against each other, as if you have to choose between belief in God and belief in medicine. As a physician, how do you reconcile science with faith? I mean, you're trained to diagnose, to treat, to rely on data and evidence.
Baruch D. Spinoza, in the 1600s, believed that God existed, but only in nature. He looked at nature and he thought nature was profound, and God existed only in nature. There was no personal God. When you become a physician, you feel differently. You may lose that feeling, but you feel differently. There's an awe in an anatomy room. There's an awe seeing the way the body works, physiology. There's a special quality of being allowed inside the inner sanctum of someone's life. The secrets I've heard over the years, the lives I've heard and tried to mold people back together that were falling apart. It's such a privilege. It is a calling. And in the process of that, you learn to cherish a soul, to cherish the preciousness of each person. On top of that, God manifests himself, as I've just told you one story. There's 25 examples in that book. And since I wrote the book, I'm hearing more and more examples
I'll bet.
of God manifesting himself in our lives. I like to say, and I don't remember if I put this in the book, God fills in the gaps in between the data points. God fills in the gaps.
Dr. Siegel, you include stories in the book of patients who've experienced remarkable recoveries. A few you told us about Brett Bayer's son particularly. You include here DeMar Hamlin, the Buffalo Bill player who survived comatio cordis on the field. What did you learn from DeMar's story and the role of faith in those life and death moments? And what do we have to learn?
I started looking at anything that may have been a miracle on the surface. And then I looked for reasons not to include these things in the book. And I had no intention of including DeMar in the book because, he gets hit in the chest at the exact moment of the cardiac cycle. He at his age, he shouldn't have happened. Because the more strength you get in your chest wall, the less that happens.
Right.
He had shoulder pads on. It shouldn't have happened. All that shouldn't have happened, but that wasn't enough for inclusion in the book. What really made this a miracle, nobody knew about till this book was written, which is, I went to our dear friend Bill Hemmer and I said, can you get me in touch with the team physician of the Cincinnati Bengals? And he knows everybody in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
So he did. And I talked to the guy, and the guy said, it was actually a pretty strange recovery that people don't know about. But since I'm the team physician of the Bengals, you really need to talk to the team physician of the Bills, because you don't know this, but on the visiting field, it's the visiting team's physician that presides. It's
Oh,
not the Bengals. They took care of him in the hospital, but it's the
wow.
team physician of the Bills that presides. So
Wow.
I talked to Leslie Bisson, who's the team physician of the Bills, and I said to him, what is unusual about DeMar Hamlin's case? He says, I'll tell you. He says, back in 2007, and that's how I knew a miracle was coming, because what is he talking about? It's 2023. Back in 2007, he said, I had a skater on the Buffalo Skaters. It was a visiting skater from the Florida Panthers. And the guy got a skate in his carotid artery and started to bleed out on the ice. And I applied pressure, and he almost went. I barely saved him. And I said to myself then, Bisson said, he's the head of orthopedics at Buffalo, and he's a team physician for Sabres and Bills.
Huh.
I said to myself, from here on in, I rehearse. So every month, from then on, from 2007 till DeMar's event, he rehearsed on the field what they should do if there was a cardiac arrest. The whole team, what does the trainer do? Who cuts off the shoulder pads? Where's the defibrillator? And everybody said to him, Bisson, you are crazy. There's never been a cardiac arrest in the NFL since 1955. You are crazy. Bisson said, I have a feeling. I don't know why. I don't know when. I have a feeling. And they made fun of
Wow.
him. And then DeMar happened, and they went, they were there less than a minute. They brought him back, which is, we have an expression in medicine, time is brain. Time is brain. They brought him back, got the defibrillator, got him back, got him to the hospital. Then he was out for a few days, actually, which wasn't reported. And he woke up and he had that famous line, who won the game? And Bisson said, you won the game of life.
Wow. Is Bisson a person of faith?
Yes, yes, and he prayed for DeMar, and him and DeMar have prayed together, and they've also done something else that I think is really important and works throughout my book, that when you receive a miracle from God, most of the people in my book turn around and figure out a way to give thanks to transfer that on to the world. DeMar does. He started a scholarship for underprivileged young guys that want to be like him. He's out there in the community teaching CPR, making sure defibrillators or automatic defibrillators are everywhere. Bisson does the same thing. They're a recipient of a miracle of God, and they give back.
Yeah. Yeah, that's and which is replete in the Bible, offering thanks after we see this in the Old Testament, we see it in the New, offering thanks to God after a blessing like this. Dr. Siegel, you write in the book about moments of intuition and foresight playing a crucial role in healing, like the story of the rabbi who somehow knew his old carpenter's infant son had a heart problem. What do you make of that kind of knowledge, that intuitive knowledge? Is that divine inspiration, medical instinct, or both?
The intuition is part of healing. But what I'm trying to bring out in this book, and especially in that chapter on the Rebbe that you're talking about, is that may not be unique to physicians. We're not the only ones.
Oh.
The best line in that chapter is when the Rebbe sees that the third son of his carpenter isn't thriving, and he says, check your mezuzah over the door, and he sees a broken letter in the shape of a heart. He says, get a cardiologist to look at him. He get a cardiologist to look at him. He finds a problem with the heart. Now the Rebbe says, tell the cardiologist he's got to fix it fast. Operate. And the cardiologist says, I'm not listening to some rabbi. I don't care who the hell he is. And the kid has a cardiac arrest and almost dies because they didn't listen to the rabbi. Then they operate. Then they save the kid. And the kid lives into a healthy adulthood. But, I'm not saying listen to the rabbi, but be as a healer, look for incoming.
Aha. Look for incoming. And I love that you also, in the book, you honor the faith of these families who are obviously always pulling for their loved one and interceding for them. And, how has this changed you, these events, and your access to these events?
It's changed me in many ways. Every time you write as well, every time you write a story, the writing of the story changes your perception. You mentioned the carpenter.
Yeah.
My favorite, and it brings me to tears to tell you this, is that carpenter met his wife by looking out of the Rebbe's window, and he sees her walking down the street. And he says, "This woman interests me." He pursues her. He ends up marrying her. Then he has those 3 boys, and the third boy with the heart problem.
Wow.
And then at the end of his life, the Rebbe was in the hospital suffering a stroke and a seizure, and one of the very last doctors he had the name of Bronfin, Dr. Bronfin. And she said they all were coming to him for miracles, but he didn't have a miracle left for himself. He used to give dollars out to people and say, "Give those to charity." He had no more dollars left. A couple months later, she was in the hospital, and I met her, and she was my wife. So I realized the miracle of the carpenter came to me. It was his last miracle. She said he had no more miracles left, but I met her because of him.
Yeah,
because of the rabbi.
She was looking through his folder and the information, and that struck up the conversation, which is amazing. Mark, Mother Angelica, who I worked for, used to say, "Do the ridiculous so God can do the miraculous." And it strikes me that medicine requires us to do something, to act, even when you're not entirely sure if it will work. How does that idea play out in your experience as a doctor? The sense of faith one has to have in your instinct, in your training, and in where you're being led in particular cases you encounter.
I love that way you put that. That's asked and answered. I love the way you put that. It's that we have to do it without knowing what bend we're going around next. And the instinct not to do that leads to physician-assisted suicide. It leads to premature use of hospice. It leads to writing people off too soon. The best example I have in my life is my 102-year-old father, who at 98, had a ruptured bowel that they said would never heal, but one doctor believed it might. And so he didn't say 98, hospice. He said, "Let's try to see if we can get it to heal." And he put him on nutrition through the vein for a month, and it healed miraculously.
Wow.
And then he had to get on dialysis. He had to be on a ventilator at 98. The guys are putting him on a ventilator because they liked him. They were, they could feel something with him. And now he's had dialysis for 4 years. He had a hip operating on at 99. I mean, and he lives for the love for my mother. And my mother is 100, and she lives for love for him. I mean, it's just a miraculous story, but it compounds itself by what you just said, Raymond. Around each corner, you don't see a stop sign. You see a yield, not a stop sign.
Dr. Siegel, you've interviewed spiritual healers, medical missionaries alongside of presidents and CDC directors. What have those healers taught you about the limitations and the possibilities of modern medicine?
I think they've taught me that modern medicine is not limited, but it can be too self-important. They've taught me that physicians out there have to learn humility, and that they have to learn that there's a higher power, that despite their best efforts and even the greatest technology, they're not gods. We are not gods. We have God's hands. And that's what we have to learn.
Wow. Tell me about the doctor at Lourdes whom you interviewed, Dr. Alessandro de Franciscus. In the book, you talk to him about the confirmation, the great lengths they go to at that shrine in Lourdes, which, purportedly has healing waters. And they go to great lengths when anybody claims a healing to confirm that it's actually true.
Because one of the major miracles, and thousands apply for miracles, and that's part of the story too. Because you may apply for a miracle and actually have a miracle, but it doesn't make Catholic Church criteria. So I've heard many stories since I wrote this book of people who went to Lourdes and they feel better, or their cancer didn't come back. But if the Lord's rule is, if medicine helped, we're not going to qualify you. So if we're talking about sainthood here, beautification and saint, and later on canonization, if we're talking about that, then they want to know for sure that modern medicine can't explain it. So Sister Bernadette had a miracle because she went there with a Cauda equina syndrome, a twisted spine. She couldn't pee on her own. She had catheters. She had a twisted foot, and she was like using a wheelchair. And Sister Bernadette was in the grotto in Lourdes, and then 3 days later, when she was back home in another part of France, she suddenly felt a warmth going through her,
Huh.
and she was able to get up and walk, and she peed on her own that night for the first time. When DeFranciscus looked into this case, they assigned 33 doctors to look at it, including experts on the spine and expert radiologists.
Mm.
And DeFranciscus himself is a pediatrician and a Harvard-trained epidemiologist. They got a psychiatrist or two involved to say she's not crazy. They went through everything, and there was no physical explanation.
Wow.
That's the Catholic Church's definition of what I call a hard miracle. But
Right.
Cardinal Dolan
Yeah.
says there are soft miracles.
Right. He talks
And
about soft miracle. What's that? What constitutes a soft miracle?
soft miracle is what we've been talking about up until now on this podcast, which is that a soft miracle is a combination of unbelievable medicine combined with clear-cut spiritual intervention by God. It's a combo. And that's a soft miracle. The line that Cardinal Dolan has about his niece was, when she was cured of cancer, I said, "Is that divine intervention? Because your sister was praying every single day." He said, "That and Dr. Berganelli. That's a soft miracle."
That
was the oncologist.
It's a twofer. Dr. Siegel, you've interviewed President Trump multiple times. You know his health history probably better than most. The president just underwent an MRI in October at Walter Reed. The White House says the results were perfectly normal, but I know there's been a lot of speculation online. What should the American people be paying attention to when it comes to the president's health?
I like the idea that he's been transparent here. I think we came off of a president which was behind a curtain. And by the way, that wasn't the first time. If you want to understand this whole thing, you got to look back at history. I'm not targeting Biden when I say he was behind the curtain and we don't know when he had that prostate cancer. I saw way at the beginning of his term that he was having problems with his gait and with his elocution, and I didn't feel these were just gaffes. So there were periods of disorientation from the word go, and it looked like it was getting worse. But I want to point out that Woodrow Wilson had a severe stroke, and he had Spanish flu, and the public didn't know about it. He was whispering instructions into his wife's ear on how to run the government when he was in France, with the Treaty of Versailles. He thought that the French Foreign Legion was coming to arrest him because he was hallucinating.
Oh, no.
And it's probably why Germany got hurt, got chastised so much, leading to the Nazis. So,
Wow.
I mean, public, when Reagan was shot, he lost a lot more blood than we were ever told. Eisenhower had a lot worse heart disease than we were ever told. Kennedy's back problems were worse than we were ever told. So it isn't. The one exception to all of this was George W. Bush, when we really knew how healthy he was. He was running, then he hurt his knees, and he was on a mountain bike, and I've been mountain biking with him.
Right.
President Trump shows a lot of signs of being in good health. I think that he said he just aced another cognitive exam. More than that, I mean, they're picking on him for taking 5-10 minute naps. I mean, he doesn't sleep much at night.
No.
So he's going to take naps. His
Yeah.
blood pressure's low. His cholesterol is under control. He has good longevity in his family. I don't see any reason other than the usual political fighting the MRIs he had.
Well,
The MRI.
that's
the
why I
MRI
want to talk about that, because there's a lot of, you see the people trying to capitalize on this. There's wild theories. They're all over the internet and social media that the president is taking an Alzheimer's drug, and that could explain the bruised hands and the sleepiness. What do you make of that?
I think that the friability of his skin tissue is age related. And I think that the swelling in his legs is from all the standing he does, but that's probably why they did the MRI. They're not finding anything wrong with the organs there. His blood tests are likely okay. We've seen them. And the MRI of the heart, I have a theory on that. There's a cardiologist at Mount Sinai who's one of the top in the country named Fuster, and he believes in MRI of the heart for screening. So clearly, it's a big executive function thing. So somebody is in the president's ear saying, "This is how we screen now." It's not how I screen now.
Yeah.
But a lot of people use an MRI to look very carefully at the heart, and his is apparently normal. That's pretty good for 79.
Yeah.
Normal heart, normal MRI of the abdomen, normal cognitive test, normal blood pressure, normal cholesterol.
Yeah.
I think, and again, I haven't examined the president. I've interviewed him
Yeah.
multiple times. I find him to be very engaging. I don't know why they would be talking about his cognition. Doesn't seem, it seems pretty advanced.
Yeah, no, I was just with him a couple of weeks ago in the Oval Office. He remembers names and dates, and I mean, he has an amazing retentive memory, actually. And on top of it, he has the thing that that any Alzheimer's sufferer would never have: a quick sense of humor. He's
Yeah.
on it. That to me is the big tell, that he's with it more than I think some of his political enemies would like to admit. But
And you and I have something in common, and I'm flattering myself
yeah,
now by saying this. We're both quick on our feet on the air, and that's a sign of advanced cognition. He has that too.
yes,
If
he
we
does.
and if he had a reality show today, if he went back and did the Apprentice again, it would be 40 million viewers. So I don't.
And probably 2 hours a night, they'd extend it. But he is the oldest president in American history, Dr. Mark. He's also been diagnosed with chronic venous insufficiency. For people who don't know, what is that condition and how serious is that?
That's probably where the leg swelling is coming, which is why I think
Mm.
the MRI was a huge overkill. They wanted to make sure that stopping of the drain, if you will, didn't come from higher up, and they did. So if
Uh-huh.
you do an MRI, the drain's not stopped higher up. What venous insufficiency means, as you get older, your veins in your legs, especially the superficial ones, have valves that don't do as good a job at signaling, let's get the blood back to the heart. So the blood pools. It's
Mhm.
called venous pooling. It's extremely common with aging. It's extremely benign.
Aha. Okay, good. Dr. Siegel, I want to shift gears to talk about the healthcare crisis that's really unfolding right now. Enhanced Affordability Care Act, that bill, the Obamacare subsidies, are set to expire at the end of December. About 22 to 24 million Americans could see their premiums more than double in January. As a medical professional, what do you think is the right solution here? And should these pandemic-era subsidies be extended?
Well, I have to talk about what's practical.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to need to be a Band-Aid. Otherwise, there's going to be another uh, shutdown, or at least people at each other's throat for a prolonged period. There's got to be a Band-Aid, but we got to recognize that this was a bait and switch, because the Obamacare exchanges never worked, because the insurance companies promised more affordable care, but they ended up sucking money out of the government and then used the pandemic as an excuse, and it ends up being hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars in subsidies for an insurance that doesn't provide you care. Listened carefully in 2009, and I heard the word healthcare, and I knew they were talking about health insurance, not healthcare. So crummy insurance where you have to pay a premium and then you have this huge deductible means maybe you get a colonoscopy for free, but if it finds something, you can't get the procedure to repair it, and you can't get the doctor to do it because the networks are so narrow. Then you don't even know the price of anything because there's no price transparency. Some middleman is sucking profits out of the system. The drug companies are working in cahoots with the insurance companies. That's the system that Trump's trying to address. So his idea that let's give the subsidies to the patient may sound ridiculous, but it's actually on the right road. Let's get free market into this. Let's get price transparency. Let's get competition. Let's stop rigging the system. Once we get rid of the individual mandate, the system was going to fall, because the individual mandate is an involuntary servitude to a system that wasn't providing care. Once that went away, you know what that scam was, Raymond.
Yeah.
Let's put in young, healthy people that don't need insurance at all,
Right.
make them pay a premium, then we can pay for the sicker ones. But what is that? That's not anything. That's a scam.
Right.
So once there was no mandate, those younger people aren't going to buy any of this stuff, and you're stuck with rising premiums that the government then props up. It's a broken system.
Yeah.
I think they're going to put a Band-Aid. I'm hoping the Republicans win this with a year Band-Aid. 3-year extension like the Schumer's plan is ridiculous.
I want to move on because I read reports today, and this is troubling. And for some reason, I don't see it being widely reported. There are reports from China of hospitals, Dr. Siegel, battling an airborne virus that has moved through 17 provinces. Is this COVID 2.0? What is this thing?
I think what it is, and we've heard several of these stories since COVID.
Yeah.
What it is you can never tell what's coming out of China. You're not going to get transparency. With SARS one, you know,
Mm.
we thought we thought we demanded it. That's what the biggest fallacy of the Fauci argument, by the way. And I'm not getting into the whole issue of pardons and forget about that. I'm
Yeah.
talking about the fact that he predicted we could have a global consortium of scientists that would protect the world. That didn't happen because China hit everything with SARS-CoV-2, and then the WHO backed them up at the beginning, and then we ended up with that. So the answer is I don't necessarily believe that there's a killer virus coming out of China right now that's going to destroy the world, but you know what? We wouldn't know if it were. And
Mm.
of course, the Chinese military is involved in bioweaponry. Of
Right.
course, SARS-CoV-2 came out of the lab, and it was probably a biodefense strategy someone else is going to create, because it must have been seed stock for a vaccine they were trying to create against a potential bioweapon. All secretive, all distrustful,
Mm.
all dangerous. Nothing's changed.
Wow. So this thing could be brewing or maybe not. We don't know.
When it is brewing, we're not going to know. We
Wow.
don't have any. We don't have boots on the ground.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
how did we never are allowed boots on the ground.
Yeah.
So we don't have a way to overcome what you're talking about now. It's pretty scary.
I'll say. Well, we will pray, Doctor, that that's not coming our way. I saw a story the other day about doctors warning about these cosmetic fillers that so many people are turning to get rid of their wrinkles, that can lead to skin loss and even blindness. How safe are these fillers? And I guess they're talking about things like Botox, right? Which is botulism.
They're only safe in the hands of a highly trained dermatologist or, if it's for migraines and a neurologist, somebody that really knows where to put them, what they're doing, and
Yeah.
what the risk benefit is. And that applies to crazy stuff that's going on TikTok. Young girls taking a rib out so that they look more svelte. There's a rampant unhealthy movement on TikTok now and social media that's based purely on narcissistic body image, and it is extremely dangerous.
Wow. Yeah, well, you see the sad side effects. I mean, these people with, infections for their Brazilian butt lifts that are done for, a quarter of the
That's
price.
another thing.
Yeah.
Medical tourism isn't safe. You go down to Mexico and you
Right.
have somebody stick a needle in you. I don't know where that needle was before. Stay out of China. Stay out of Mexico. I'd stay out of Venezuela right now.
Yeah, I would too. But there was this story I saw with who's the guy from Simon Cowell, the guy from American Idol. Simon Cowell apparently is having his blood washed, some kind of purification process where the blood is cleaned in Mallorca, in Spain. Is that a safe procedure? Is that something people should be doing?
That's a completely unsafe procedure because, first of all, it risks infection. Secondly, it risks damaging the blood cells, and then you get something called hemolysis, which can cause a stroke or a blood clot in your lungs. I mean, you don't want to take blood cells out. And thirdly, it doesn't even work.
No.
If you want to get waste out of your body, you don't take the blood cells out. You use the kidney and the liver. God gave us a kidney and a liver.
So detox those and then let nature run its course. Dr. Siegel, one of the major themes in your book is that healing requires more than just pills and procedures, that it requires faith and hope and community. But our healthcare system, it's increasingly bureaucratic and impersonal. How do we get back to a model of medicine that treats the whole person, body, soul, and mind?
Because that's exactly what my book's major message is. Because we're going to have NVIDIA robots that clean the hospital floors. We're going to have AI that spits out reports and takes a transcript. If you don't have a human center to all of that, how tragic is it that a study recently gave AI better ratings on empathy than humans? That shows we have a long way to go. And Raymond Arroyo is a very empathetic and caring guy. Marc Siegel is too, but we didn't learn that. I didn't learn that in medical school. We developed that, as part of how we were brought up. So we got to get back to, are our kids spending too much time on iPhones? Yes. Are they? What's happening on social media? Are they being bullied on an avatar or by an avatar? Are they playing too many video games? The culture is becoming violent and it's becoming competitive and it's promoting insecurity, and it's top down too because parents are doing it as well.
Yeah. Mark, one of the most powerful stories in the book, in your book, is about a medical missionary in Sudan who performed a successful cancer surgery. It's really amazing. Tell us how this happened and why was it so miraculous?
This man is a miracle himself. He trained in family practice. He went to Brown University, where I went,
Oh,
which means I've been hearing about him for years because they keep writing him up. He's a superstar. And he was a Navy flight surgeon, but he never trained as a surgeon. He taught himself surgery and went to the mountains of Sudan, the Nuba Mountains, right in that war zone area,
yep.
and where all the refugees are, millions of them. And he opened up a hospital, which is the only hospital for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles. And he performs surgery. He does over 1,000 cases a year, and himself. And he uses outdated anesthesia with bellows. He uses autoclaves to sterilize equipment. And he has a sparse staff. So one day, another family practitioner is visiting him from DC, and a young girl comes in who's 9 years old, and she's got a bloated abdomen. So he does a CAT scan, and he finds Wilms tumors, cancer of both kidneys. And he says, I've removed one kidney before, but I've never removed 1.5 kidneys. I don't know how to do it, because if you don't preserve that good half, there's no dialysis over there. So you got to preserve that. So the other guy says, well, go on the internet. Maybe there's an instructional video. But Katina says, my guy says, the internet hasn't worked here in weeks and weeks and weeks. What internet? You can't even get email here. So the other guy says, why don't you try? So they go over to the computer and they bang on the computer. And all of a sudden, a miracle occurs. The internet goes on out of nowhere, but it's very slow. So it's like, where'd this internet come from? He hasn't even seen it. He searches out and finds a video on this exact surgery, of instructional video. But Raymond, it's in Polish. It's in Polish.
Which
And
he doesn't speak.
which he doesn't speak a word of. And it's using equipment they don't have.
Oh,
So they
boy.
start watching this video, trying to learn whatever they can, glean whatever they can, carefully watching, and the thing crashes in the middle of it. So one says to the other, do we know enough to do this operation? Katina says, what choice do we have? So they go to do the surgery. They take out the one bad kidney. They take out half of the good kidney. They estimate where the cancer ends. They follow the procedures from the Polish video.
Oh,
The baby, the 9-year-old survives. They get her through chemo because they don't have radiation therapy. She goes back home, and she comes back in several months later, completely fine and healed with God's help. And they
unbelievable.
prayed.
Yeah, I'll say, what an incredible story. Dr. Siegel, you write powerfully in this book about the role, Miracles Among Us, about the role of prayer in healing. Now, you're a physician, you're a scientist, but you're also saying here that prayer matters, and a lot of doctors seem to be uncomfortable with that. How do you address this with patients? Do you encourage them to pray, and do you pray with them?
I encourage them to pray. I pray with them. I encourage family to pray with them. And no doctors have given me a hard time yet on this book, even though it's selling like hotcakes, because doctors believe too. Surveys show that 75% of doctors are religious, whether they admit it or not, and 70% believe in medical miracles. I'm telling them, combine the two when you go to the bedside, because it makes you a sharper healer, more of a healer. You're not going to compromise the science. I'm not saying a voice from above says don't operate. I'm not saying that. I'm saying combine the two right there at the bedside.
Yeah. Well, you've spent decades in medicine. I mean, you've seen miracles as you've chronicled in this book, and you've seen tragedies. What keeps you going? What gives you hope that you're facing a case when you're facing a case that seems hopeless?
Well, it's that remembrance of that guy that walked out of the ICU. It's knowing that I'm doing God's will. It's family situations where people have overcome, like my parents being 102 and 100. It's my patient, Dick. I have a patient that I put at the end of the book named Dick, who is 85. He has survived 4 cancers. He has survived lung disease. He's survived not transplant, but bypass surgery. He survived a neurological disorder where he supposedly couldn't walk. We got him up walking again. He's like a surfer that surfs just ahead of the latest technology. He had incurable liver cancer, but they came out with the seeds just in time to cure it. And
Wow.
so I said to him, what's the secret of all of these miracles compounding each other? He says, I'm staying alive to take your phone calls, Doc. And that, and by the way, he smokes. He smokes. I
What?
can't get him to stop smoking. He says, look, you have to have something in life that makes you happy. I can't get him to stop.
He's got to take up dancing or something. The smokes are a bad trend in the midst of all this. Doctor, what would you tell people, particularly families, people watching this who now have a grave diagnosis or have been told, you've got to get right to surgery? What would be your advice to them about where their head should be and the role of faith in their journey?
Well, they have to have faith, and it's got to be strong, and they should be praying, and they should be praying all along, and keep a regular mindset of prayer going. That helps. I think community prayer helps. I think believing in your doctor helps. Your doctor can be a healer. I want to tell you out there that I don't care whether your doctor is religious or not. I just care that they're open to the idea of a greater spiritual reality that's guiding them. You don't want somebody that's closed to it. You want someone that's open to it.
Hmm.
Michael Baden is in my book,
Yeah.
and we both know him well, and he's not really a believer, but he believes in a larger reality than his ability to comprehend. And he has a very funny story in a book about a guy who wouldn't die, kept going to the morgue, and he was still alive, and they kept sending him there the wrong way. But at the end of the book, I say, and I write in that chapter about coffins where people go there with ringing the bell, and they have tubes so they can breathe in case they're not really dead.
Yeah.
And at the end, I say, Baden may not believe, but he has that kind of voice that will soothe you on your way into the next world.
I love that. Marc, you end the book with a beautiful prayer guide that was kind of unexpected. This was the last thing I thought you'd put in a book like this. Why was that important for you to include, and what do you hope readers take from that?
I kind of knew that was something. If it amplified my message, which is prayer is an important part of healing. Here are some healing prayers, and then I went around and asked some of the main characters in the book if they could provide them, and to my absolute joy, they wrote them. Cardinal Dolan wrote a prayer for me about
Wow.
how God is closer to you when you're suffering, when you're sick. Shannon Bream, who wrote the forward, wrote a prayer for me. Brett Baer wrote a prayer that guided them every day when Paul was young, in the hospital. I used one of Dodi Osteen's daughter's prayers that just beautiful. Some are from Psalms. So there ended up being, so it grew, and it grew into this, Pastor Sam, it grew into this collection that is something you could really take with you to the bedside.
Wow, it's incredible.
And it's not just one faith, which is another message in the book. It doesn't matter what your faith is. It matters that you believe.
Yeah, that you believe in God and that you give yourself to Him. Now, there's something I do on every show, Dr. Siegel, my Arroyo Grande questionnaire. I'm going to submit you to this as well. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Well, the best advice I've ever received is to believe in a higher being that will comfort you, and that's who you should be afraid of, God, not fellow man.
Wow. What's the worst advice you've ever received?
My father said recently that he lived to 102. If someone threw a punch at him, he ducked. I go, you're giving me that advice now when you're 102? How about when I was 5?
A little late on the draw there, Dad. What do you know, Dr. Siegel, that no one else knows?
I know that faith and science can be combined. And I know that it's wrong to use science to evaluate whether faith is working. Let's use faith to evaluate whether science is working. Why is there this dichotomy? I know that.
Fascinating. What's your favorite book and the last great book you read?
My favorite book is Anna Karenina because not knowing when I read it, again, I'm a famous person for not knowing something, and then having it. Like, I didn't know that I met my wife because of the Rebbe. I only realized that when I wrote the chapter. And Anna Karenina was my favorite book because I loved the characters. I loved Anna and I loved Levin. And I loved the way Tolstoy told the story without knowing that the entire Russian Revolution was based on that book. When I met my wife, my first line to her was, how old were you when you read Anna Karenina? She said, 12. I was in love. Then I found out everybody in the Soviet Union read it at the age of 12. So
Hmm.
I didn't know the history of it, but I love the narrative. I like narrative fiction a lot,
Yeah.
historically based narrative fiction. How about you?
Well, I love biographies. I love histories, but I read fiction. I read a lot of fiction, like mysteries and that's my fantasy books, but mostly fiction. I love mysteries and fiction since the time I was a kid. I was a big Agatha Christie, Conan Doyle, Nagio March guy. That was my jam and still is kind of. I like the trick of it. I like to see if they can turn twist it around at the end. The best can. Though some of these mystery writers today just can't. It's either obvious or they cheat you. They withhold things they don't tell you, Doctor, which drives me crazy. What's your greatest fear?
My greatest fear is that someone I trust will end up being someone I can't
Oh.
trust. And that happens. And it's hard to deal with. That's happened to me and it's hard to deal with. And I try to handle it by reinventing the person or by showing them kindness and see if I was wrong, turning it back around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, there's nothing worse than that kind of betrayal when you put your trust in somebody.
Doesn't happen
Terrible.
that often.
Yeah.
Most of the time people are good.
Yeah.
Most of the time you can bring out the good in people.
Yep. I agree.
Like you're a great person. You're
Well,
absolutely.
now the whole audience is going to ask you, they want to see the breakdown of how you came to that determination. So I'm going to leave that aside. What's your greatest regret, Dr. Siegel?
It's not what I thought it was going to be because you got me at a very good time. My greatest regret for years, when I wrote I'm working on a novel now that I've been working on for many years.
Wow.
And
Historical novel?
it's a medical mystery, but half of it takes place in the 1700s in the vampire times. It's not really a vampire book,
Wow.
but I look at that period, and that's a backbone of part of the novel. It takes place in 1732 and in 2032. And
Wow.
one of the greatest moments of my life was that I had Jason Epstein read it before he died, maybe the greatest editor in history. He was Nabokov's editor, he
Yep.
was Philip Roth's editor.
Yep.
And Jason reads this and he says, I need to talk to you. And his wife, who we both know well, is like, I don't know what he's going to say because he hates every book I ever give him to read. It's like so offensive to him. He sits down and he says to me, and this was years ago, I keep rewriting it, making it better. He said, this is one of the top 5 novels I've read in the past 15 years. He says, you've wasted your life being a doctor, he tells me.
Oh.
And I was his doctor. I was his doctor. He
That's
says to me, Vladimir would love this book. You should have spent your whole life writing these. But at the time, it was a regret. But right now, with the way the Miracles Among Us is doing and the way I've put it all together,
Yep.
I'm feeling pretty good about it. So I'm not in a regretful mood.
Yeah, that's not really a regret. That sounds like the next step in the journey, Doctor. To me, anyway. I love that, and it's a mystery, so I'll read it. What happens when this is over, Dr. Siegel?
This being,
I let you interpret it. This life, this interview, this day, but I think for me, life. What happens when it's over?
I don't want to have regrets when it's over. I love the way my family's coming along, my children. I have a great wife. I feel very good about the way I'm living my life, the way I'm communicating on TV. I, like you, don't get a lot out of being patted on the back by our audience, but I like that I feel I'm doing something in terms of communicating medicine to people, policy like we did today.
Yep.
I think I'm a good communicator. I love the fact that my writing is succeeding to this level because it's very important to me. So I don't think I'll have any regrets. I think I'll miss that life isn't longer.
That you don't have more time. I think we'll all regret that a little bit.
102 is pretty good, though.
Yeah, I mean, your genes, I mean, my goodness. Your dad's 102. How old's your mom?
100.
Oh, my God. I mean, come on. You've got another lifetime to live. You got plenty of time to write those books, Dr. Siegel.
So do you.
Well, let's stay at it. We'll encourage each other. Dr. Marc Siegel's incredible book, The Miracles Among Us, How God's Grace Plays a Role in Healing, is available at bookstores everywhere. Of course, at the top of the New York Times chart, which is no easy task, I'll tell you. Having gotten there a couple of times, it's a slog. Incredible. Congratulations.
It's Mount Everest.
It is.
Mount Everest.
It really is. But congratulations. A blessed holiday season to you and Christmas season, and we'll see you in the new year, Dr. Siegel.
Great to be on with you, Raymond.
Thank you.
Great to be on with you.
And I hope you'll come back to Arroyo Grande soon. Why live a dry, constricted life when if you fill it with good things, it can flow into a broad, thriving Arroyo Grande? I'm Raymond Arroyo. Make sure you subscribe. Like this episode. Thanks for diving in. We'll see you next time. Arroyo Grande is produced in partnership with iHeart Podcasts and DP Studios. It's available on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.